We've been listening to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent discussing new sanctions to put economic pressure on Iran. It's all part of the Trump administration's so-called economic D-Day against the regime. The secretary saying the sanctions will target 5 key sectors: digital assets, technology, gold, aviation, and shipping, with Bessent declaring the goal is to sever every economic lifeline that sustains the regime. But the secretary did not say which countries in business with Iran will be facing these sanctions. And it's also not clear when such sanctions would take effect. The secretary also discussed Canada's renewed trade war with the United States, saying President Trump would like Canada to come to the table and negotiate in good faith, saying the country turned down a good deal last week. Let's bring in NBC News chief business correspondent Christine Romans. Christine, so who is he not talking about? The secretary would not mention names, and he had 2 opportunities to talk about potential sanctions on China and avoided those. Is China the big target here?
Well, China is the biggest purchaser of Iranian oil. And, this has been happening for years. India used to purchase a lot of oil from Iran, but has been tapering that off under pressure from the United States. So China is sort of the elephant in the room here. Is the United States going to put pressure on China to stop some of its oil purchases? But he's given this a name. He's called it Operation Economic Outcast, and says this very tough language and words from the Treasury Secretary. He says it's an economic onslaught to, sever the economic lifeline that sustains this tyrannical regime. And he even promised that by the end of the week, you could see sanctions of a major institution, he said, that has been aiding Iran. So they really want to isolate the Iranian regime. It's interesting because in his op-ed in the Financial Times, he had also said that this kind of economic pressure could obviate the need for more military action, which is interesting because critics of the U.S. strategy, if there is one with Iran, would say, why weren't they doing this first? There have been years and years of economic sanctions. This is really putting the screws in. Should this have been done first before the military action? Does it show that the U.S. might be running out of some of its options? We know that oil prices have been rising and continue to rise in recent days and weeks, in part because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. And that's what these kind of sanctions are really aiming at, to really try to cripple the regime, and so the U.S. can take back real control over the Strait of Hormuz and get things flowing again.
The secretary was also asked about the trade talks with Canada, which seemed to fall apart last week. And then you had the president saying today that he would institute further tariffs on Canadian-made automobiles, auto parts, and steel. Those tariffs would come into effect the 1st of next year. What is this? I mean, how serious is this trade war? And when is we as American consumers, when could we feel the impacts of this, Christine?
So the $20 billion in goods that the U.S. buys from Canada that the president put tariffs on Saturday, that's only 5% of what the U.S. imports. But if you're trying to buy one of those goods, maybe plywood, maybe a goose down jacket, maybe other clothing, hockey sticks, furniture, wine, cheese, you will probably see higher prices relatively quickly, but it is a small overall number in the big, huge trading relationship that the U.S. has with Canada. The bigger concern is if you have retaliation and then more retaliation. The Canadians say they're going to retaliate dollar for dollar on that $20 billion. And then you've got the U.S. now that is saying, OK, there's more pain coming for the Canadians in January. That kind of a cycle can be dangerous. It can be dangerous for growth, and it can cause prices to rise overall. It's interesting, I think, that the Treasury Secretary made a point. He was basically saying that Mark Carney was elected as an anti-Trump America critic and that he might be playing to his own political base. But I will say, Anne, when you look inside Canada, there is broad support for Canada, as they see it, standing up to the U.S. bully and not taking a deal that is not good enough for Canadian farmers and Canadian producers. So we are at an impasse here in the very near term over that trade relationship, I'd say.
Christine, thank you. Let's bring in NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. Monica, we heard the Treasury Secretary mention the president is working the phones today on these sanctions. Do we know anything more about that?
Well, I thought it was notable, Anne, the fact that the Treasury Secretary said there that it was going to be the president who was going to be making some calls to world leaders, he said, to let them know about these secondary sanctions that could be coming. But we really should just remind everyone that this is a strategy that the White House and the Trump administration has attempted. And this conflict is going to be nearing the 6-month mark on Friday. And just a couple of months ago, they made a very big show of something that they dubbed Operation Economic Fury, that included some of these similar elements. And it tells you a lot that obviously what they have tried on this front has not produced the results that the U.S. wants to see, which is to sort of try to force Iran back to the negotiating table potentially to see if another kind of tentative framework could emerge. But as you mentioned, and we're discussing there with Christine, there is still this lingering question of if this does not work, if this doesn't end up being what they want to see as the sort of, quote, economic asphyxiation, as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent put it, then would that mean that the U.S. would have to return to these larger scale military strikes and escalation that we know they haven't taken off the table, but that there's been a little bit of hesitation to revert back to that because Iran has proven to be surprisingly defiant for U.S. officials who have sort of been trying to see if that patience would eventually wear thin. But really, they are still, Iran is still riding this out. So this is sort of the latest crank in some of those levers, according to the White House. But it's unclear, again, whether this really will have the effect that they want it to. But it comes at a critical time, Anne, because President Xi of China is supposed to be coming to the U.S. For a high-profile visit a month from today, September 24th. So we'll be very curious to see whether one of the world leaders that the president is speaking with today or in the coming days could be President Xi to discuss this, because when Secretary Bessent was asked whether China would be exempt from this, he said no, that no nation was going to be exempt from this, and that any country or entity that is really doing serious business with Tehran could be feeling the effects of this. So we will see which of all of these countries right now up on your screen the president will be speaking with the leaders of directly, or whether this is happening official to official. But it does come at a very, very key point, pivotal point in this military conflict as we just get closer and closer to the midterm elections here and how that may weigh on voters' minds. Anne.
Monica, and yes, the reaction from Iran so far, at least the foreign minister there has said that this is just, they called this measure by the White House a measure of desperation. Monica Alba at the White House for us.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.